So over 2 months ago, I made a video called 2004 Metal versus 2024 Metal because I just thought it was a fun little idea since metal has evolved so much over the years, and I grew up in the 2000s, but I'm also very into what's going on now with the inaudible, hilarious noises being created. And I was surprised to see the other day that that video actually had over like 1 million views on all the platforms, as well as a bunch of people creating like just comments and, shit talking as usual, but also creating basically a discussion of like, what's better? And I hear this all the time, metal used to be better before, now it's overproduced garbage. And then on the other side, you have younger people going, well, metal before was boring, a bunch of sweaty peoples hanging out in a room and hoping you get lucky with a riff. Also true. Also, did you know that 47% of you aren't subscribed? Hit the subscribe button down below. Hit the notification bell. Come hang out. We do fun metal things. Ew. Being a person that's a pure metal poser myself over all these years, I wanted to just talk about this shit because I think this is an important topic. And I grew up again in the 2000s. The stuff I started out with wasn't even metal. I started up with like NoFX and Rancid, and then Blink 182, into then classic rock thanks to Guitar Hero, like Guns N' Roses, Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, that kind of shit, until I got introduced to the 578 Masters As I Lay Dying with Shadows Our Security album, still a goated album till this day, as well as then just ruining my entire life with breakdowns, and 578 Drop C riffs, where I delved into, Bullet, Kill Switch, August Burns Red, Bullet, what else? What the else? Math? No, not math. I didn't do mathcore yet. But yeah, all of that stuff, and then on my way through the journey through the years, metalcore turned into crabcore. Holy shit, that was a scary time. And then I delved into symphonic metal, thrash, more like thrash metal, more death metal, deathcore, all the cores, all the take out the cores, all of that shit. And growing up, it was definitely a different vibe. Metal felt very special. It still felt like this underground niche thing, but it felt big. It was more in the mainstream. There was tons of metal in video games, like, of course, Guitar Hero, the Tony Hawk games, which was big for a lot of people. Need for Speed. How the fuck can forget listening to Hand of Blood while running away from the capos at 5 stars? You can't. Right? Even GTA has like metal music and a bunch of shit like that. Like all these legacy games. And that was right when social media was popping off. And it was just a fun, special time. And, to create a lot of that music, it was even different than, of course, 20 years before that. Because in the 80s, people, like I said, would kind of stand in a room and it would cost a lot to even just want to record something because you had to go to a professional studio. Meanwhile, in the 2000s, you could start to maybe record at home a little bit. Like, there was just such a different vibe to everything. Electronics were used a lot. I think, I don't want to say more because in the 80s, obviously electronic music was huge. But in terms of metal, electronics really started to see its entrance into the 2000s, like bands like Linkin Park utilizing them everywhere, combining hip hop, rap, and metal, which turned into new metal. And of course, all those new metal bands basically did that as well. And even during the 2000s, there was people going, hey man, I miss when metal was cool and true Cavalta and good and thrashy riffs and yeah, Slayer, yeah, Slayer. But it was just such a different time. And it feels like every 20 years, or just the evolution of music in general, this is going to keep happening, just like how people are comparing the 2000s to now. And the 2000s, like I said, are a special place. It was a lot more focused on riffs. And because pop was starting to get really big in terms of just like mainstream big dance pop music that you'd hear like Britney Spears on the radio and in video games every day just with your metal, I think a lot of the songs also started to become a bit more simple and also complex in a way. And then there started to be a bit more of a divide in genres, but also a bit more of a unification when it comes to all these different influences coming into metal. And again, I'm going to use metalcore as the specific example here, but also new metal and all this, where in the 2000s you'd sit there, probably still in the room. I was like 10. I don't know. I was playing WoW at home. That's not my problem, right? And you could tamper with ideas. You could tamper with a bit more gadgets and pedals. And sure, they had pedals back in the 80s and all that. But even just the amount of skills guitarists had in the 2000s were much higher. Bassists were still being utilized. Sorry, 2024. Drummers got better. There was drummers that could do jazz and death metal randomly like that. That was kind of cool. Like groove started to be a big thing within metal, which I absolutely love. Again, new metal really showcasing that shit and Meshuggah. But then also vocalists, I feel like started to get a lot better, and it wasn't just the old school heavy metal vocals, which respect to a lot of them, and they actually probably really could sing, unlike a lot of people, nowadays that just put filters on everything and massive amounts of effects, where it was just, yeah, but not trash, right? Screaming wasn't as much of a thing. It was just the Cookie Monster noise if you went all the way to the death metal side of things back in the early days. But in the 2000s, all of that started to blend. Deathcore starting to come out too, Suicide Silence, things like that. But again, my video particularly was really representing more of that metalcore side. And that's where I think vocalists were able to really shine, with combining huge, clean singing, more baritone style with these big choruses, and then just good ass roaring with actual maybe technique. Even if they don't know they were doing technique, it wasn't just only the Cookie Monster noise. Like, it sounded a little bit like Marge Simpson dying instead. It was lovely. And I'm a little biased because I grew up in that era, the 2000s era. It was beautiful. It was happiness, and as a guitarist, it was paradise. But also, as I say, I champion the modern age, because nowadays everything is very different, right? Do riffs still exist? Yeah, there's big riffs. Guitars are not really, we're not in drop C anymore, Dorothy meme, right? It's not really happening. We have gotten so much lower, and mixing and production have also gotten so incredibly good that it's able to make up for a lot of the weirdness and sounds and inaudibility of us trying to do a lot of the low tuning, random what the shit that we do nowadays, doing it in the 2000s. It just couldn't happen. The technology wasn't there. And I saw a lot of people also saying, 2004 was banger riffs versus 2024, it's like technology, which honestly, I agree with. A guitar nowadays, it's an effects machine. It's like a fucking DJ. Waka waka. How many noises can you make? Like I said, you still can make sick riffs, and there's a lot of other subgenres of metal, progressive death metal, tech death, that utilize insane riffs, insane scale, solos, right? Which weren't really a thing nowadays as much, but definitely were a thing in the 2005. So many bands nowadays use production as the main focus, which is something that I honestly really like. Do I miss the 2004, 2005 era of metal? Of course. And apparently so do a lot of other bands, because every band has like a foundation that sounds either like Linkin Park, Slipknot, or like, I don't know, like Converge nowadays. But hey, that's cool. But production is such a huge focus. Like, you can't have a shitty mix now. It's not going to happen. Like, if your stuff doesn't sound pristine and clear because you couldn't afford $200 to go to a mixer, it's not even starting off. No one will give a single about what's going on. Everything is by far more processed. The tones, the vocals, the effects, the drums, if they are even using real drums. That's a thing. A lot of you guys listening to modern music still think that even if the band has a drummer, they're recording the drums. Why? When a machine does it perfectly? And there's, of course, bands that still do record real drums, but it's just a lot less common than people might even assume. Bass, same thing. Sorry, bassists. And there's some incredible bassists nowadays too that are just god mode, god tier. I mean, like Alex from was it Cannibal Corpse? Alex Webster? I think that's the guy. Caleb, don't include that if I'm wrong. Like, there's so many incredible musicians, and I think musicianship has gotten to an all-time high. But musicians aren't utilizing a lot of that musicianship because also we've kind of broken all the boundaries. You can only break the Guinness World Record of going 3,000 BPM 30-second notes so many times. You can only be so technically impressive, so technically heavy and abrasive and brutal that there's just a point when you have to look at your instrument and go, oh, I guess we should just, add some trap loops or some shit, like add some synths. Like, why not? Because just being technically proficient isn't enough anymore. And I think a band that they're not necessarily in the modern metal sphere, but they're right there. They're parallel to it, which is Polyphia. Some of the best guitarists in the world. Everyone in that band's amazing. Bass, drums. But they are also so synergized and combined within synthetic sounds and production, which is really what helps them stand out the most, besides just their insane skills and talent. And nowadays there's also bands in the modern metal scene, which I showcased on my channel, even like Marar, where I'm sitting here and I'm like, yo, that guy is using his guitar as a dubstep machine. And not even to mention yet vocalists nowadays, where it's just a war of who can make the craziest animal zoo noise, which that's cool. And deathcore is really leading the charge of that. But also vocalists just have so much more knowledge and access to things like YouTube and learning, where they can just actually learn techniques, get better, learn multiple techniques. I think vocalists nowadays, majority of everyone, even deathcore vocalists, also are clean singers. Like, that's a given, and can rap. Like, the repertoire of what everyone can do, they're almost a multi-instrumentalist within their own instrument. Which back in the 80s, that's not happening, right? That's very rare. So I think nowadays, the music is very different. And it can be frustrating, as a person myself too, that grew up in the 2000s, that misses just some good ass 5, 7, 8, some 0, 1, 3, 4s, man. I miss that too, just like the next person. But I also have a new appreciation for production, which is allowing genre blending more than ever, and allowing, I think, the pop culture to infuse with the metal scene in a way that it hasn't necessarily done before. I don't want to say it's done on a bigger scale, because the 2000s were wild with all of, MTV and games and all of that shit. But nowadays, I feel like kids are growing up with, obviously, TikTok, with the Instagrams, with nonstop content. It's like okay to be someone that's a pop person and to hard with metal. Like, the generations have changed too. Like, people are much more open. The youth seems much more open to new music. And they're able to, I think, take in that new music because of the production and because everything actually does sound processed, which sure is unfortunate that there's people growing up that don't know the difference between, like, maybe a real guitar versus like something that was programmed in MIDI with a bunch of noises nowadays. That's the reality. And it's the same way I think people, like I said, thought during the 80s versus the 2000s, where the technology just increases and the talent of people increases and the songwriting capabilities, I think, don't necessarily always get better, but people get better at combining different types of music within their songwriting. So this whole argument of what's better, the old 2000s versus now, people are going to be doing the same thing 20 years from now. And the answer is very simple. Everything's awesome because we still have breakdowns. What's the problem? Listen, have a playlist. Listen to 2004 bangers in 2024. Listen to some lo-fi. Listen to some hard style, some clowncore. Who gives a But yeah, there you go. Metal talk for the day. I just felt like talking about this shit, so that's what we're talking about. We're doing it. Okay? I didn't even get ready. We're going. Right? Hey, if you also want a full song of Metal 2004 versus 2024, let me know. But there's a discussion. What do you like better? What's the best era of metal for you? Comment down below. Send your friends. Do you know why? Because the YouTube big boys like it. It makes bigger. Just like the breakdowns. What the is Marar? Okay, bye.